Before we dive into today's jaw-dropping true story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our Brave Animals community. We bring you powerful tales of loyalty, instinct, and the animals who step up when no one else will. This story might just be our most shocking yet. A police dog stood his ground on a hot Arizona runway, growling, barking, refusing to let a uniformed pilot board his private plane. It looked like a glitch in training until they looked under the aircraft. What they found made the officers back away in horror. The air that morning had the dusty heat of late spring. Tarmac shimmered like liquid silver under the relentless sun. At the edge of Prescott Regional Airport, an unusual team stood by for a routine security check. But nothing about this day would be routine. Deputy Sheriff Emily Monroe squinted into the brightness, her boots planted firm on the blacktop. She wasn't alone. Beside her, tail low but eyes sharp, was Rocco, a seasoned canine unit with 10 successful rescues, 3 narcotics busts, and an instinct that had saved more lives than some officers in her entire department. The hum of propellers rolled across the airfield. A sleek white turboprop taxied into view. On its side, navy blue letters read, "Clear Sky Medivac." The company was supposed to be transporting emergency equipment to Texas. At least, that's what the manifest claimed. Emily raised a hand to shade her eyes as the door popped open and a man stepped out. He was tall, clean-shaven, maybe in his late 40s. Aviators, crisp shirt, polished boots. He carried himself like someone who expected to be trusted. Pilot Dale Carver. He introduced himself with a practiced smile, handing over a clipboard. "Just a quick walk around," Emily replied, nodding toward Rocco. "Standard." Dale's smile didn't waver, but the moment he stepped toward the boarding stairs, Rocco bristled. His ears perked, muscles coiled. And then, he barked. Not a warning. Bark. A full-throated, deep-chested snarl that made 2 ground crewmen flinch. "Whoa, boy," Dale said, hands up. "Is he okay?" Emily stiffened. "Rocco, down." Rocco didn't move. In fact, he lunged a few feet forward, yanking Emily's grip. On the leash. The pilot tried again to mount the stairs, but Rocco snapped. His teeth bared. Bark after bark, louder now, angrier. The hairs along his back stood on end like a bristling warning flare. Emily's radio crackled. "Everything all right over there?" came the voice of airport security. "Stand by," she answered, but her eyes never left Rocco. She'd worked with the dog for over 3 years. This wasn't panic, it wasn't aggression, it was conviction. Rocco had locked onto something. Maybe he smelled the jet fuel, Dale offered nervously. "He's trained to ignore that." Emily's voice dropped. "Don't move." Just then, a low drawl cut through the tension. "You'd best listen to the dog, partner." The voice came from behind them. Wyatt Calderon approached with the casual stride of someone who'd spent more time on horseback than behind a desk. His dusty jeans, leather boots, and faded cowboy hat made him stand out. But he was no stranger here. A former border patrolman turned local security consultant, Wyatt had been working part-time as a perimeter specialist at Prescott for over a year. He nodded toward Rocco. "That Malinois don't spook easy. If he's blocking that plane, there's a reason." Dale folded his arms. "You people are being ridiculous." Wyatt tilted his head. "Try moving again. See what happens." Emily moved quickly. "Step back from the aircraft. Right now." Dale hesitated, then backed off, jaw tight. Rocco's attention didn't shift. His eyes were fixed, his stance low, tail rigid. He started circling around the side of the plane, nose close to the ground, occasionally letting out short, sharp barks. "Emily," Wyatt murmured, pointing. "Look under that wing." Near the landing gear, one of the maintenance panels looked off, too clean, the bolts mismatched. A small square of aluminum had clearly been removed and replaced. Sloppy. Emily grabbed her radio. "Unit 4 requesting support. Possible hidden compartment under aircraft. Stand by for K9 indication." Rocco barked again, then froze. Emily leaned closer. A thin seam ran along the belly panel, barely visible unless you were looking for it. She reached for her flashlight. Wyatt was already crouching beside her. "You smell that?" Emily nodded. sweat, and something else. Fear, Wyatt said simply. They unscrewed the bolts together. The metal door came away with a dull creak. Inside was a cramped makeshift compartment lined with thermal blankets, and in it, curled into herself like a trembling shadow, was a girl, maybe 9 years old. Pale skin, tear-streaked cheeks, wrists bruised from tight restraints. She flinched at the light. "My God," Emily whispered. Wyatt knelt beside the hatch, voice low and calm. "Easy, sweetheart. You're safe now. Ain't nobody gonna hurt you." The girl's lips quivered. She glanced at Rocco, still hovering protectively nearby, and whispered, "There's more." Emily blinked. "More what?" "More kids," the girl said, barely audible. "In the warehouse. They're going tonight." The temperature on the tarmac seemed to drop 10 degrees. Emily's voice turned steel cold. "We need backup now." She turned to Dale Carver. The pilot was sweating now, hands trembling. When he saw the girl, all color drained from his face. I didn't know she was in there," he stammered. "I swear I was just told to fly. They said medical cargo, that's all." Emily read him like a worn paperback. "You were paid to fly blind." Dale didn't argue. Rocco padded back to Emily's side, but his body stayed alert, eyes scanning. The dog was still tense. Wyatt stood slowly, shaking his head. "This ain't just a smuggling run. This is a route, and they've used it before." Emily looked at him. "You recognize something?" Wyatt nodded grimly. "Yeah. 20 years ago we saw this set up along the border. Same kind of makeshift hatch, same thermal lining, same look in the kids' eyes." He turned to Emily. "They're moving kids like freight, and if we don't act tonight, some of them won't see tomorrow." Emily's voice dropped to a whisper. "We follow the lead. No press, no noise, just justice." She knelt beside the girl again. "Can you tell us where the warehouse is?" The girl nodded weakly. Rocco gave a soft whine, pressing his body slightly against the child. Her hand reached out, hesitant, then rested on his fur. Her tiny voice broke every heart, in hearing range. "I knew someone would come. I heard him barking in my dreams." Emily swallowed hard. Wyatt adjusted his hat. "That dog didn't just find a child, he found the trail, and I'll be damned if we don't follow it." Prescott Regional Airport had never seen a lockdown like this. Within 30 minutes, the tarmac had filled with cruisers, unmarked SUVs, and a growing wall of flashing lights. The little girl they found beneath the plane was now wrapped in a soft blanket, sipping water in the back of an ambulance. She didn't speak much, just looked down and clutched Rocco's collar every time he got near. Emily Monroe stood by, arms crossed tight, eyes scanning the small group of officers assembling by the perimeter. Wyatt Calderon leaned against his dented pickup, chewing thoughtfully on a toothpick. He hadn't said a word since they pulled the kid out, but his jaw hadn't stopped working since. "You think she's telling the truth?" asked Deputy Kyle Torres, scribbling into a small notebook. Emily didn't look up. "She hasn't lied yet." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "Kids in shock say all kinds of things." Wyatt flicked the toothpick into the dust. "She ain't in shock. She's in survival." That shut Kyle up. Emily crouched beside the girl again. "Can you tell us anything else, sweetheart? Do you know how far the warehouse was? Were you ever outside?" The girl nodded slightly. "We had windows, but they were really high. I saw mountains sometimes and trains." Emily glanced at Wyatt. "That sound like anywhere nearby?" Wyatt thought for a beat. "Could be the junction off Route 89. Old freight depot's out that way. Been shuttered for years, but the tracks still run behind it." Emily stood. "Let's roll." The old warehouse was nearly invisible from the road, buried behind thick scrub brush and an empty loading dock. It used to be a distribution center for feed and supplies back in the 90s, but nobody had touched it since. Or so people thought. Emily parked the cruiser a good block away and approached on foot with Wyatt and Rocco. They moved slow, keeping low behind rusted fences and outcroppings of junked machinery. Wyatt pulled out a pair of binoculars. 2 trucks parked behind the west entrance, one's idling. Emily raised her radio. Units 3 and 5, flank from the north, move quiet. Rocco was already ahead, tail down, nose low. His steps were precise, cautious. Then he stopped. One paw lifted, Emily froze. "What is it, boy?" she whispered. Rocco growled low. Not loud, just enough for her to know something wasn't right. They crept closer. Behind a dented dumpster, a man in a hoodie crouched, smoking. Hadn't seen them yet. Wyatt moved with surprising silence for a man his size, looping behind him and pinning him down with a swift armbar. "No sudden moves, friend," he said calmly. The guy squirmed. "Hey, I'm just taking a break, man." Emily moved in, flashing her badge. "Break from what?" But he shut up. Fast. Inside the warehouse it smelled, like mildew, sweat, and metal. Emily's stomach clenched. Rocco barked once, then veered left toward a wall lined with steel containers. She waved her team forward. One of the containers shook slightly. "Clear right. Left secure." Emily approached the nearest container. A lock had been sawed through. Recently, she raised her weapon, opened it. Inside were 3 children, 2 boys, maybe 10 or 11. One girl younger than Luna. All of them blinked at the sudden light, flinching. "It's okay," Emily said, lowering her voice. "You're safe now. You're safe." The kids didn't move. They didn't cry either. They just stared. Wyatt appeared behind her. "We got 5 more in the back. They're sedated. Ambulances on the way." Emily's hands shook. She clenched her fists and took a breath. This was big. Bigger than she'd thought. Bigger than anyone had thought. It wasn't just a one-time smuggling attempt. It was a whole operation. Outside, the suspect finally started talking. His name was Brandon Ray. Just a runner. Claimed he didn't know what was inside the containers, just got paid to stay outside and watch. "Who paid you?" Emily demanded. Brandon shook his head. "They only text. I don't meet nobody. Cash drops." Wyatt chuckled dryly. So convenient. Rocco sat beside the man, staring up at him, growling ever so slightly every time Brandon hesitated. "I swear," Brandon said. "They call themselves The Path. That's all I know. Sometimes I pick up packages from a place in Flagstaff. Sometimes they meet me halfway." Emily exchanged a glance with Wyatt. "This isn't local," she muttered. "This is regional, interstate, maybe international." Wyatt pulled a pack of gum from his shirt pocket and handed Emily a piece. "You're gonna need something to bite," he said. Back at the airport, Luna was sitting up now. She had asked for Rocco twice, and when he finally returned, she didn't say anything. Just rested her head against his neck. A nurse came by with crackers and juice. The girl ignored both. Emily sat beside her. "We found them, Luna. Just like you said, you saved them." The girl looked up. "I didn't save them, he did." Emily looked down at Rocco, his tongue lolling slightly in the heat. "No," Emily said quietly. "He found you, but you had the courage to speak. That's what saved them." Luna blinked, then reached out and scratched behind Rocco's ear. For the first time that day, she smiled. A small one, but real. Wyatt stepped into the sunlight, leaning against the ambulance door. "You think it's over?" he asked. Emily shook her head. "No. This was just one hole in the wall. We haven't even seen the house behind it." Wyatt spat into the dust. "Then we keep swinging." Rocco gave a low woof. The girl giggled. It was the only sound that didn't make Emily want to cry. Back at the warehouse, evidence teams were digging deeper. False floors, stolen IDs, dozens of burner phones, GPS trackers. Emily stared at the wall. Someone had painted something in faded blue letters. "Only the strong make it through." She looked back at the kids. Their silence said more than words. "We're going to be strong for you," she whispered. Wyatt stepped beside her. "So what now?" Emily sighed. "Now we find out who the Path really is, and we shut it down." She looked at Rocco. "Because if this dog hadn't barked, that plane would have taken off, and those kids would have disappeared." Wyatt nodded slowly. Good thing he's not the kind to stay quiet. Emily gave a small smile. No. He barks for the ones who can't. They called themselves the Path. At least that was the name scrawled on the burner phone's welcome screen, recovered from the busted warehouse north of Prescott. It was basic, cold, and anonymous. Just 3 words on a cracked display. But to Sheriff's Deputy Emily Monroe, it felt like a declaration, a challenge, maybe even a threat. Back at the precinct, the room was dark except for the glow of a projector, casting grainy warehouse footage on the wall. Wyatt Calderon sat in the corner, boots crossed on a desk, his hat hanging on his knee. Rocco rested beside Emily, calm now, but alert, as always. So far, we've counted 11 kids from 2 separate stash sites, Emily said to the room. All under 12. No IDs. No reported missing cases in this county. Someone's keeping them off the grid. Detective Harper from the state's Human Trafficking Task Force stood with his arms crossed. This is above county pay grade. If what you're suggesting is right, this thing stretches across multiple states. It does, Wyatt spoke up. Some of those kids had blankets labeled Red Peak Transit. That company's out of Colorado, but they shut down 5 years ago. Or at least, that's what they said. Harper gave him a sideways glance. And you know this because... Wyatt shrugged. Because I used to haul cattle through Red Peak before they shut down. They knew every back road and blind corner. From Utah to Laredo, Emily pointed to the wall. They're not using public airports, they're using airstrips, crop dusters, and private runways with no TSA oversight. That's how they moved Luna out. We need to look at every unregistered airfield in the region. Harper sighed. That's a 100-mile radius minimum. You gonna sniff each one out with your dog? Rocco lifted his head. Emily smirked. If we have to. Later that afternoon, Wyatt and Emily drove east in his truck, Rocco in the back seat, nose to the open window. You think they'll let us keep going? Emily asked. Wyatt glanced at her. We're not asking permission, remember? He reached into the glove box and pulled out an old map. Not GPS, not digital, just creased paper with red ink markings from years ago. Here, he said, pointing. If they're moving goods or kids out of Arizona into New Mexico or Texas, they're not doing it through I-40. Too hot. They'll take these old ranch access roads, cross into tribal land, and jump back onto rural highways once they're clear. Emily raised an eyebrow. How do you know all this? He gave a tight smile. Because once, a long time ago, I had to know how to find people who didn't want to be found. The road narrowed into gravel as they left city limits. Miles passed in silence. Rocco suddenly growled low. Wyatt slowed the truck. What's he got? Emily sat up straighter, watching the dog's posture shift. He wasn't barking, just stiffening. Focused. Something's close, she said. Or familiar. They rounded a bend and saw it. An old water tower. Abandoned. Rusted. But beneath it, barely visible from the road, was a chain-link fence. Behind that, a concrete hangar half-collapsed from age. No signs. No markings, just a single black SUV parked under the shade. Don't like this, Wyatt muttered. Emily radioed in their coordinates. I want eyes on this place in 5, but we go in first. Wyatt checked his holster. Emily double-checked her vest. Rocco jumped from the truck without a word. As they crossed the fence line, Emily noticed something strange. The silence. No birds. No wind. Just the sound of their own steps and the faint ticking of cooling metal. Inside the hangar was mostly empty. Oil drums. Old engine parts. But then they saw it. A hatch set into the floor. Fresh metal. New bolts. Wyatt whistled low. Someone's been busy. Emily nodded at Rocco. Go. Rocco moved slowly, nose to the crack, then pawed twice. Confirmed scent. Wyatt pulled the hatch open. It creaked, then swung wide to reveal a set of stairs descending into darkness. Emily turned on her flashlight and led the way. The air grew colder as they stepped down. 10 feet, 20, then they hit concrete, a hallway, and voices, a man talking on the phone. We got him ready for tomorrow. Pilots locked. Coordinates confirmed. No changes. Emily signaled for quiet. Wyatt moved left, gun drawn. Rocco stayed low to the floor. They peeked around the corner. There were 3 of them, 1 armed, 2 standing near cages. Yes, cages. Not big ones, just large enough for a child to sit inside. There were 5 in view, 2 occupied. One of the children was crying. Emily's chest tightened. Suddenly, a loud clatter behind them. Rocco had knocked over a wrench with his tail. Instantly, the man with the gun spun. "Who's there?" Emily stepped out. "Drop it." Gunfire erupted. She fired once, hitting the man's arm. Wyatt took the second guy down with a tackle. Rocco lunged forward and grabbed the third by the leg, dragging him screaming to the ground. It was over in 30 seconds. The kids stared, wide-eyed. Emily holstered her weapon and knelt. "You're safe now. We're here. Nobody's going to hurt you again." The girl in the cage sobbed. The boy didn't move, just stared. Wyatt found a set of keys and opened the locks. They got the children out, wrapped them in emergency blankets, and called it in. Harper's voice crackled on the radio. "You found another site?" Emily replied. "We found another chapter. This one had a name." She looked at the wall, a banner, crisp, white. "The path begins with us. It wasn't random anymore. This was organized, branded, executed." She turned to Wyatt. "They're not just trafficking. They're building something." He nodded grimly. "And it's time we start tearing it down." Rocco sat beside one of the kids and let them pet his head. Emily looked at him. That dog didn't just smell danger. He smelled truth. The boy, who hadn't spoken, finally whispered, "Is he staying with us?" Emily smiled gently. "He's staying with all of us." Rocco had slept with one eye open all night. He was stretched out on the floor of the command center at the Prescott Sheriff's Office, just under a folding table stacked with cold coffee, maps, and worn-out laptops. Around him, detectives came and went, voices low, faces drawn. But every time someone got too close to the entrance, Rocco's ears twitched. He was still on duty, even in rest. Sheriff's Deputy Emily Monroe stood in front of the evidence board. Dozens of photos now pinned to it. Satellite shots of hangars, blurry faces from traffic cams, aerial views of warehouses just like the one under the rusted water tower. In the middle, underlined 3 times, was a phrase, "The path begins with us." It was no longer just a sick slogan. It was a brand, a movement, and someone was running it like a business. "They're not hiding anymore," Emily said out loud. Detective Harper looked up from a burner phone he was pulling data from. "They're not bragging either, not online, not through the usual dark web routes. No chatter, no drops, no digital paper trail. These guys are ghosts." Wyatt Calderon walked in, a brown bag of breakfast tacos in one hand, his weathered cowboy hat in the other. "They may be ghosts, but ghosts bleed when you press the right spot." He tossed Emily a foil-wrapped taco. She caught it without looking. "You ever heard of a town called Winstead?" Wyatt asked, chewing. "Small place, about an hour south. Used to be a military listening post during the Cold War." Emily nodded. "It's a ghost town now. Mostly dirt roads and bad cell reception." "Exactly," Wyatt said, "which makes it a perfect place to stash kids, fly under radar, and disappear if someone gets too close." Harper leaned forward. "And how do you know this?" Wyatt held up a photo, printed from a traffic cam 2 counties over. The pilot from the first day, Dale Carver. He was caught on film getting into a pickup with out-of-state plates in a diner just outside Winstead, a week before the warehouse raid. "Looks like he wasn't flying solo," Emily muttered. Harper grabbed his jacket. "We roll, in daylight. No lights, no sirens. We knock first." Emily shook her head. "We don't knock." The road into Winstead was narrow and lined with dry scrub. Cacti stood like sentries under the hot sun. As the SUV bounced along the gravel, Rocco stood in the back, staring out the window like a soldier ready for war. They passed a rusted sign that read, "Winstead Community Center," and nothing else. No cars, no people, just silence. Emily gripped the wheel tighter. This place doesn't even have mailboxes. Perfect for off-the-books operations, Wyatt said, and for hiding what people don't want found. They reached an abandoned motel. The sign had 3 missing letters. The front desk windows were boarded up, but in the back lot sat 2 black SUVs, still warm. Emily nodded at Wyatt. Go right. They circled to the rear, staying behind a line of dry storage containers and brush. Rocco jumped out as soon as the vehicle stopped. His body language changed. No barking. Just slow, steady movement. Head down, nose to the earth. He walked 10 feet. Stopped. Barked once. Emily and Wyatt followed. They found what looked like a root cellar. Concrete steps leading down to a steel door. Wyatt pulled his weapon. Odds we find more than tools in there? Emily answered by raising hers too. They opened the hatch. The smell hit first. Bleach, oil, metal. It wasn't a home. It was a bunker. They moved through a narrow corridor. Voices echoed faintly from the far side. As they got closer, they could make out pieces of a conversation. She signed the papers already. We ship out tonight. The client wired half. You get the wristbands? In the box. RFID's clean. GPS is locked. Emily's stomach turned. These were children they were talking about. Not boxes, not products. Children. She nodded at Rocco. Go. The dog launched forward. The raid lasted 37 seconds. 3 men subdued. 1 runner shot in the leg. A makeshift control room destroyed. Computers smashed. Walls lined with thermal blankets. And behind one final door, a padded room. 6 kids, all under 10. No shoes. No names. One of them had a small tattoo on his wrist. A compass symbol. Emily looked closer. It's their brand, she said. Like livestock. Harper walked in behind them, face pale. We're going to need trauma counselors. Lots of them. Wyatt picked up one of the RFID bands. These are linked to a company called Northway Medical Logistics. Sounds legit, Emily said. It's not, Harper added. They filed for bankruptcy 2 years ago, but someone's still running the database. Rocco sat beside the smallest girl. She touched his ear and didn't say a word. He didn't move, just stayed beside her like a silent guardian. Emily looked around the bunker, then up at the security camera in the corner. Its red light blinked once. Whoever was running this, they were watching, and they just saw it all fall apart. Back at the station, the kids were being processed, fed, washed, given fresh clothes. Most were still silent, but one boy pulled Emily aside. They had a name for the big man, he whispered. Emily crouched. What name? The boy looked at Rocco first, then said softly, Silas. Emily's blood went cold. That name wasn't in the files. It wasn't in any database, but she had heard it once before. Wyatt leaned in. You okay? Emily didn't answer. She was staring at the evidence board, at a blurry photo in the corner that no one had paid much attention to. A tall man, sunglasses, beard, boarding a plane. He had a compass tattoo on his left hand. Under it, a name had been scribbled in red ink months ago during a separate case file. Silas Beck. Wyatt followed her gaze. You know him? Emily nodded. Not yet. She looked down at Rocco. But we're about to. The name Silas Beck hadn't been spoken around the Prescott Sheriff's Office in almost a year. Not since the Human Trafficking Unit in Phoenix sent out a request for regional information about a suspected ringleader connected to interstate child movements. At the time, the name came with a single grainy photo and 0 confirmed sightings. But now they had more. A wrist tattoo. An RFID tag system tied to shell companies. A secret bunker buried under a ghost town. And 6 more children who didn't know their last names. Emily Monroe stared at the photo on the evidence board, her knuckles white against the edge of the table. He's not a ghost anymore, she said. Wyatt Calderon stood beside her, arms folded, reading the expression on her face like a familiar map. "You've seen that look before." "I have," she said quietly. "On men who thought they couldn't be touched." Harper walked in with a printout. "You're going to want to see this. We tracked a financial transaction tied to the same Northway medical account wire transfer offshore routing, but the receiving end local." "Where local?" Emily asked. "Flagstaff," Harper said. "Private property on the edge of forest land. And get this, the deed is in the name of Esbeck Holdings LLC. Wyatt let out a low whistle. "That ain't subtle." Emily grabbed her gear. "Let's go. We do this clean. No press. No warning." Rocco was already on his feet. The drive to Flagstaff took 2 hours and felt like 5. The road curved through pine-covered hills and long stretches of nothing but highway and thought. Emily kept her hands tight on the wheel, her mind sharper than ever. She remembered the first time she heard the name Silas. It was whispered during a case in Yavapai County. A girl they rescued said it like it was a myth. A bedtime story meant to scare children into silence. Now that ghost had an address. Wyatt rode shotgun, flipping through the file. According to the rental agreements, the place is listed as a private retreat. No guests, no neighbors, just surveillance and fencing. "Does he live there?" Emily asked. Harper, following behind them, replied over the radio. "No clue, we've got no movement, no lights, could be empty, could be a trap." Emily glanced in the rearview mirror. That's what Rocco's for. They turned off the main road onto a dirt trail surrounded by tall pines. Eventually they saw it, a log-style lodge set back from a clearing. Quiet. Too quiet. Wyatt pointed to the garage. SUV out front. Engine cold. They parked under the cover of trees and made their approach slowly. Rocco walked in front, ears up, tail stiff, scanning. Every few feet he paused and sniffed the air like he was waiting for the wind to speak. The front door was unlocked. Emily looked at Wyatt. "He's not here." They moved in. Inside, the lodge looked like a rental catalog. Leather chairs, stone, fireplace, empty bourbon bottles, and clean counters. But what stood out most was the smell. Bleach. Always bleach. Emily went straight for the back rooms while Wyatt covered the second floor. Rocco led her down a narrow hall to a door that looked newer than the rest. She opened it. It was an office, not a casual home desk. A full surveillance command post. 3 monitors, 2 external drives, cables running to a hidden antenna on the roof. Someone had been watching something. Or someone. Rocco barked once. Emily turned toward the wall. A row of printed photos. All tacked with care. One of them was her. Another was Harper. And the last was Luna. She stepped back. "He's watching us." Wyatt came down the stairs fast. "He's gone, but not far." On the desk was a printed flight plan. Private jet. Out. Of a rural airstrip in Winslow. Departure in 6 hours. Emily stared at the clock. "We can make it if we leave now." Harper's voice came through. "I'm 5 minutes behind you. Let's shut this down." Winslow Airfield looked abandoned. The sun was dipping behind the hills casting everything in gold and long shadows. The air had a strange stillness. No birds, no wind. Just the distant hum of a power line. They spotted the jet on the edge of the strip, engine idling. Emily crouched behind an old fuel drum, radio at her mouth. "We've got eyes on the plane. 1 man near the stairs. Can't confirm ID." Wyatt scanned with binoculars. "Too clean. He's waiting for something." Rocco paced beside them, tense. Emily whispered, "Find him." Rocco shot off like a bullet, disappearing behind the hangar. Less than a minute later, they heard barking. Sharp. Urgent. Emily ran. She turned the corner and saw him, Silas Beck. He was walking toward the plane with a briefcase, confident, focused, until Rocco lunged from behind a parked truck, snarling. Silas dropped the case and turned to run. Emily shouted, "Stop." He didn't. Wyatt circled from the other side, cutting him off. The man froze. Emily raised her gun. On the ground now. Silas raised his hands slow. You don't know who you're messing with. Emily stepped forward. I know exactly who you are. And I've got a dozen kids who'll never forget you. Rocco growled low, standing between them like a sentry. Handcuffs clicked. It was over. But it didn't feel like justice yet. Back in Prescott, the arrest made quiet waves. No press, no leaks. Just long nights of paperwork and silent relief. Silas was being transferred to a federal facility. He wouldn't talk. At least not yet. Emily sat outside the station with Rocco by her side. The sun was rising behind them. Wyatt brought 2 coffees, handed one over. You think it's done? He asked. Emily shook her head. Not even close. Silas was just one head of the snake. We've still got a whole network out there. Rocco nudged her hand. She smiled. But we're not alone. Wyatt looked out at the horizon. You ever think about what would have happened if Rocco hadn't barked that day? Emily nodded. Every single night. She looked down at the dog beside her. He didn't just bark to stop a plane, he barked so the world would finally listen. The courthouse in Prescott had never been this quiet. No reporters, no shouting, no flashing lights. Just the soft creak of pews as families gathered quietly, the echo of footsteps on polished wood, and the low murmur of people still trying to understand the weight of what had happened over the last 2 weeks. The kids rescued from the Paths network were now under federal care. Medical treatment, trauma counseling, and temporary foster placements had begun. But for many of them, the most consistent thing they had seen since their rescue was a dog. Rocco. He stood by the front row with his vest off, eyes watching, calm as ever. His job was done for now, but he still didn't leave Emily Monroe's side. Sheriff's Deputy Emily sat quietly, not in uniform, just a plain blazer and boots. She had been asked to speak not by the department, but by the families of the rescued children. She didn't want to. Public attention had never been her thing. But then Luna asked her to. So here she was. She stepped up to the podium, cleared her throat, and looked out over the room. Wyatt sat near the back, hat in hand. Harper leaned against the side wall, arms crossed. The kids were sitting together in the middle, some smiling, some still unsure. Emily started simple. 2 weeks ago, a dog refused to let a man board a plane, and because of that, over a dozen children are alive today. She paused. It wasn't a lucky guess. It wasn't a malfunction. It was instinct. It was training. It was loyalty. Her voice softened. Rocco didn't bark because he was told to. He barked because something in that moment was wrong. And instead of ignoring it, instead of assuming someone else would handle it, he took a stand. She looked at the kids. And that's what we're here to honor. Not just a dog, but a truth. That even in silence, even when the world moves too fast to notice, someone brave enough to listen, to trust their gut, can make a difference. Luna raised her hand from the front row. Emily smiled. Yes, sweetheart? Luna stood and walked, slowly up to the podium. She held something small in her hand. A dog tag. She reached out and clipped it to Rocco's collar. The tag had one word on it, Esperanza Hope. Emily's voice cracked for the first time that day. She asked me if she could rename him, Emily said to the crowd. I said he already had a name. She said Hope was the name he earned. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Outside, the Arizona air was dry and warm, the kind that sticks to your clothes but doesn't weigh down your spirit. Emily walked along. The edge of the sheriff's office lot, Rocco pacing beside her. Wyatt pulled up in his truck. You did good, he said, stepping out. Not just in there, but all of it. Emily nodded. It still doesn't feel finished. Maybe it's not supposed to, Wyatt said, adjusting his hat. Some stories don't get a neat ending. Some just fade into the next one. They looked at the sun setting behind the desert hills. Think Silas will talk? Wyatt asked. Emily shrugged. Eventually. They always do when they're no longer in control. Rocco barked once, a soft bark, as if agreeing. Emily looked at him. He's earned his rest, she said. Not yet, Wyatt replied. There's still someone out there thinking they're smarter than a dog. That night, Emily sat alone in her living room. The lights were low, the TV off. Rocco slept on the rug, belly rising and falling slowly. On the table sat her badge, her notes, and a photo of the kids at the courthouse. Luna had drawn little, hearts around each one. She picked up her notebook and wrote a line on the last page. Sometimes it takes a bark to wake the world up. Then she added a question under it. If a dog can trust his instincts to save a life, why do so many people ignore theirs? She looked down at Rocco, still sleeping. You changed everything, she whispered. And she meant it. Forever. Bravery doesn't always come with sirens and spotlights. Sometimes it comes on four legs in a quiet moment from someone who can't speak but understands everything. Sometimes courage is refusing to move when the world expects you to step aside. Now ask yourself, have you ever felt something was wrong, deep down, but stayed quiet? Next time, will you listen like Rocco did?